Okay, so yesterday where we just stopped, we were discussing about object identification, right? Exactly. So as I told, okay, so there are four levels, the main levels of object identification. Like, okay, first general description, we say the mandatory properties and assistive properties, we call it as. And then, okay, so we have ordinal identifier where we use index, location and creation time, either one, not all three. You can use only one in ordinal identifier. And then, okay, so we have visual relational identifier, so where we relate one object with another object, or one or more objects we can relate with in this level. And when I say smart identification, then generally we have base filter and optional filters on that, but both it won't make any difference much. Those are the what properties will be prioritized, and you just make the order in this. So when you use smart identification, what exactly it does is it filters the object with one by one property, that whatever we specify. Okay, so that's how it is. Then let us see that both. Okay, so yesterday we didn't see the in the practical, but today we'll see how exactly the smart identification works. Okay, now let me do one thing. Before going into the actual application, let us build an application and see exactly how the location and all will work fine. Okay, now. So I'm trying to build one HTML application, sample HTML application. Okay. Say title. Okay. So first give the header, then the sample application for object identification. Then we'll say. Just giving the header tag here, title. Then we'll start with the body tag. Body tag. Okay. Now let us say like this. Input. Okay. So type is text. Nothing but edit field. Then name I will give as username. Then ID I will give as maybe user. Okay, and I will close that input tag. Okay, then space, I'm giving the space. Then we'll give one more space. Then I'll say input type equals to password. Okay, so name equals to password, and ID equals to password. Okay, then I'm giving BR tag, and then I will do, I'll say input type equals to button, name equals to login, btn login, okay, and ID equals to btn login. Okay, so I'm giving certain properties like this. Then after this, let me repeat the same thing. Okay, so I'm repeating the same objects almost, whatever the objects those are. where this can be is training UFT no. Then let me store this file application as sample application.html. I'm storing this as an HTML file. Okay. Save. Now let's this application open. Oops, I have to give the property. Okay, so value property I need to provide value as login and value as sign in. Okay, one is sign in and second one is login. Okay, so it has come like this, and let's see if the object identifies or not. If it is local just a moment. Okay, so if it is local file, right, if when you open it in Chrome browser, probably it's not opening, it's not identifying by the tool. So since the application is saved locally, then let me open this with Internet Explorer, and with Internet Explorer it must have to identify the object. Let's see whether it identifies or not this time. Yeah, it's identifying, no problem. Okay, now what we'll do is first understand the web edit tools, object spy, and when you take this, see, look at the properties that what we have. HTML ID is user and name is username and so and so properties that it has got like this, right? So we have got various properties for this. Then when you look at this, it has got the same properties. It has got the same properties, right? Now password also. Okay, so password as well. Some passwords some properties it has got, and here also. So properties are little different here. It has got different ID and it has got different name again, right? But when you look at this again, so BTN login, name and value, right? And here this HTML ID is BTN login and name is login and value is login. Okay, so properties are little different. Now what I will do is, okay, I'll go to object identification and let me do some setting. Okay, properties. Then for web edit, what properties I am using? Name. Okay, so name as a mandatory property and type is an assistive property I am using. Okay, or let me do one thing, HTML ID for web edit type. Okay, so instead of type I am using HTML ID as an assistive property. Okay, then for web button, okay, so name, is it HTML ID is the mandatory property. Okay, 1 minute, I cannot select same property in both the places since HTML ID is already selected in assistive, so it was not selected in mandatory. Now what I am doing is I am selecting HTML ID is a mandatory property in HTML ID is a mandatory property I am selecting. Then assistive property, what I am doing is probably I am using the name property or value property, something. Okay, so for web edit what I am doing here, name is a mandatory and HTML ID is assistive, whereas for web button HTML ID is a mandatory and the name is assistive. Okay, let me do now, since I just done with the object identification setting, let me open object repository window and let me remove the existing objects. Now, when I add this web edit now, okay. So if you look at that name, username. So name is a mandatory property, right? For web edit, name is a mandatory property. So it has taken the mandatory property. And also what happened, it has taken the assistive property as well, not only just mandatory property, it has taken assistive property also. Why it has taken assistive property? Because there are two objects defined with the same name. Since more than one object found with the mandatory property, then it automatically considered the assistive property. You got that, what I am saying here? Then now if you look at below ordinal identifier, so if you see that ordinal identifier also captured like this, location as 0. Why it has taken the, yesterday if you observed, then it was taken index, but now it is taking as location. You know the reason why? Because in the object identification window, web edit, and if you see the ordinal identifier property, we have specified as location here. So whatever the settings that you do here, then the same properties will be taken. Same properties will be taken into object repository while adding the object. But you can select any of the option. If you see that there are two properties, one is index or location. Okay, index or location. But if you select the browser, and if you see that there are three properties available for browser object. Yesterday I told that what is meant by creation time. That okay. So creation time will be available only for the browser, and creation time is nothing but open time of the browser. In case if more browsers are matched with the same properties, whatever the properties that we have given, if more browsers are matched with that, then you can use creation time. Fine. Now I have added one object, right? So it's added a location property, it's added a mandatory, assistive as well as ordinal identifier. This time let me add password. Now if I add password, then if you see that only mandatory property has been taken, but for username it has taken mandatory and assistive as well as ordinal identifier, whereas for password, okay, it has taken only mandatory property. Why it has taken mandatory property? Because even though there are two password fields here, but if you look at the properties, there are name, right? For first object, name is password, but for second object, it's password 1, right? So name is unique here. So with that particular name of the object, then only one object is matching. That's the reason it did not go to assistive. But for username, there are two objects with the same name, so that it has considered assistive property. So even though it has used assistive property, but still more than one object was there, because then we have used what properties we have used, name as a mandatory and HTML ID as assistive. But both the objects have got username. Both the usernames have got the same name and same HTML ID. So even after using assistive property, still two objects have been identified, so that it preferred to ordinal identifier. Okay. Then now when I add the button here, sign in. Now if you see that ordinal identifier is none, it's not taken any ordinal identifier. But if you look at the properties, it has captured the assistive, it has captured the mandatory property, and it's also captured the assistive property here, mandatory and assistive, but no ordinal identifier. Why? Because when it has taken the mandatory property, then it realized that more than one object is there with the same HTML ID. HTML ID is a mandatory property then. For web button we have given HTML ID is a mandatory property, right? Let us see. Web button, HTML ID is a mandatory property for the button, name is assistive. So more than one object found with the HTML ID, but with the name it found uniquely. So as soon as it used assistive property, then UFT recognized the object uniquely. So that's the reason. It stopped at assistive property only, first level. Got that? What I told? So this is how generally it identifies. First it will prefer to mandatory. It will add only the mandatory properties. But in case object is not unique with mandatory properties, then it will automatically prefer to assistive. While adding the object, it will automatically take the assistive property. Then after using assistive property, if the object is unique like this, then it will stop there only. It won't go to any ordinal identifier or anything. But in case if object is not unique even after using assistive property, then what it will do is, next it will prefer to ordinal identifier. That is the next level of identification. But when ordinal identifier will work only in case of more than one object is identified. But by default it will, we have two options here. Either you go for a visual relational identifier or you go for ordinal identifier. Okay? Then now let's understand. Yeah, but no, that's ordered. It will prefer, generally name property will come always first and HTML ID. So that's how it will prefer. Okay. So it's not like, the mandatory should come first always and assistive, but it will add both, but it will just order like first name and HTML ID always. That is a global order that they will make. Okay. Fine. But while executing, then it will prefer to ordinal and then assistive. Fine. Next, what we need to do is, here, first understand the ordinal identifier property, how exactly ordinal identifier works. Then here, location is taken as 0. Then when I highlight this, then that object has come first, right? Then I will give location as 1. Second object has been taken. Now let me do one thing. Let me go to the source code of the application. Okay. Now which one is taking? Location as 1 means earlier, second one. If I give location as 0, it is taken. What happened exactly? What happened here is, okay, as I told yesterday, location is based on the coordinates, right? And yesterday I mentioned one more point also. First it will prefer to the y coordinate and then it will prefer to x coordinate. If y coordinate is same, then it will prefer to x coordinate. Y coordinate always will be taken from left to right and x coordinate will be taken from top to bottom always. Remember that. So y coordinate always will be taken from left to right and x coordinate will be taken from top to bottom. Okay. So as earlier what happened was, y coordinate was same. If you see that, or if you look at the order how it was earlier, it was like this. Okay, I'm just removing this space characters. Okay, I just removed that space characters, and if you look at that, y coordinates are same now. So since y coordinates are same, it will prefer to x coordinates. So based on y coordinates, both the objects have placed in the same coordinate, but when it takes x, then the first object has come first, because x coordinate will take from top to bottom always. Okay, remember that. Now what I am doing is, I'm just placing some spaces here. Now, based on y coordinate, which object comes first? Then obviously the second object. This object will come first. Right? The reason because it moves y coordinate, it will always take from left to right. So starts from left, based on which object comes first, that object will be taken as first object. So when you say location as 0, the object which comes first based on y coordinate. Okay, if two objects are there in same y coordinate, then it will prefer to x coordinate. Got the location property, how exactly it works? Okay, now let's see how index works. Okay, so now if I use index as 0, which object is being highlighted? The first object, no matter of the location. The reason because in my source code, which object is defined first? That this is the object. So that obviously this index, this object index will be 0. When I press the tab from beginning, okay, when I press the tab from beginning, then which object will be focused first? That is the object. So that is index 0. Then this is second focused object, right? But when I give index 1, which object it should be? Index 1. This is the object which is highlighting second, right? But let's see, if I give the index 1, which one is being highlighted? That. But why not this? The reason because with these two properties, this object and this object, only these two objects will be identified. Right? So index will work, index or location, whatever it is, ordinal identifier, will work within those two objects only. Now what I will do is, I am removing those properties, description properties. Now when you don't use any properties to identify the object, now I am not using any properties to identify the object, then what it will do is, it will consider only class web editor. So now the index will work within all the web edit fields. Now when I say index 1, which object it should be? That one. Because what it has done is, it did not filter the objects, it filtered only the web edits. Now index will work within all web edits. So always index or location property is depending on what properties you are using to identify. Since I am not using any properties to identify the object, then it will consider only the class. So now index will work within all web edits. But if I give to identify the object, as username, index 0 will be first one and index 1 will be this one. So for index, no matter where that object is placed based on the coordinates, location is not a matter. Based on which object is defined first in the code, source code. So the object which is designed first in the source code, obviously when you press the tab, that object will be focused first. So index will be 0 for that particular object. The first defined object will be index 0, second defined object will be 1, 2, 3, like this. So that's how the location and creation type property works. Okay, now let us understand how visual relational identifier works. Yeah. First it takes the mandatory and assistive. It will filter the objects with that, and then since more than one object is found with that, then it will prefer. So first
ordinal identifier business.
Yeah.
ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడ నేమ్ అనేది mandatory నేమ్ అనేది ఒక ఫీల్డ్ సో అప్పుడు అన్నిటికీ పనిచేస్తుంది.
Yes. See, for example, name, right? Name as username I have given. So first what, it will not go to the ordinal identifier immediately. So first it will apply whatever the property I have given, it will apply on all web edits. Why only on web edits? Because the class of the object is web edit here. So first it will take the name property, not only name, any property whatever you have given, it will take that property, mandatory and assistive. Then it will go to all web edits and filter whatever the objects are there with that name. Then ordinal identifier will be applied. So after applying mandatory and assistive, then only ordinal identifier will be applied. Directly it won't apply ordinal identifier. Okay, got that answer? So name, first name, username. So two objects will be matching with that name. So it will filter this object and this object separately. Then it will apply ordinal identifier within these two. Always remember that. Okay, so let us understand how the visual relational identifier works. To apply visual relational identifier or to use visual relational identifier, you can't use object identification setting. Okay, so in object identification setting, you have only these things: mandatory properties, assistive properties, and smart identification, and then ordinal identifier. If you look at that, visual relational identifier is not there. Okay, so visual relational identifier can be set only within the repository. You cannot specify in the object identification setting. Okay, now what I need to do is, instead of using ordinal identifier, let me use visual relational identifier, and let's understand the difference. Now if you look at the password field, do we have any problem in identifying a password field? Password field is identifying uniquely, right? I don't have any issue in identifying the password field. Now what I will do is, okay, since I am identifying the password field uniquely, then what I will do, identify the username. If I want to identify the first username, then I will say identify the username which is next to the password, which is left side of password, first password field. That's what I need to say. Then, okay, to be more clear, let me do one thing. So I'm just appending one label to that. Okay. So next. Outlook. So just to be more clear to understand the objects I am using like this. Okay. Now, so what I need is here, I need to enter the value in Gmail user. But unfortunately what happened is, for this Gmail user and Outlook user, so both the edit fields have got the same kind of properties. So that's where the problem is coming. But to identify the password fields, I don't have any problem, because Gmail password and Outlook password, both the fields have got two different properties. Right, property values are different. If you look at that, this has got the HTML ID as just PWD and name as PWD, and when I look at the Outlook password, HTML ID as PWD1 and name as PWD1. So values are different for both. So I have unique identification here. So I don't have any problem in identifying the password. So let me change the logical name here, Gmail password. Now I have the problem in identifying the username. So now what I am using is, here I am using index as 0. But if you use index, then what the problem exactly is, now which object is identifying? Gmail user. So actually it's supposed to be Gmail user. So I am changing the logical name as Gmail user, logical name. So just for reference I am doing like this. Okay, now after some time what happened is, there is one more object defined. Okay, now I'll say Yahoo user. We have defined one more object, but that object name also we have given as username. Now if I highlight the object, let me refresh it. Now Yahoo user has come here. Then if I highlight the object here, which object will be identified? Yahoo user. Because this object is defined first. So obviously whenever, if there is any object defined before that object, that object index will be coming down. You got what I am saying here? So index, this is the problem with index, using index. Okay. Now, what exactly we need to do? Location also I cannot relay, because the location also may get changed. If they introduce one more object, then obviously this coordinates will get changed, and then location also may change. And even after using index was giving unique identification for me earlier, but now what happened is there is one more object introduced before, then index is changed. So if you use index or location properties, and this is the problem. Okay, now what we need to do is I need to make the unique identification. So what I will do is, when I say password is identifying uniquely for me. I don't have any problem in identifying the password. Then what I will do here is, since password is making unique identification, but for username ordinal identifiers keep changing, then I'll say instead of using ordinal identifier, I'll say that okay, don't use any ordinal identifier, identify the username field which is next to Gmail password. Then what we will do, to use the ordinal identifier, I'll just go to the visual relational identifier here and click on configure button. Now as soon as you click on configure button, then it will display like this, and just click on add. So to add the relation, click on add, and then specify the object, to which object you need to relate. Then I need to relate this Gmail user with Gmail password, right? Then select it and say okay. Now what you need to say, Gmail password is left to the Gmail user. No, Gmail password is right to the username. I'm just giving the relative, and it should be in line. Both objects are in same line. If you look at preview, and if you look at that, whatever is highlighted, green field is nothing but the related object, and this one is the object which will be identified with that. And now say okay. Now if you see that as soon as I added visual relational identifier, then if you see that ordinal identifier has been disabled. Okay, now that object is being identified. Now let me do one thing. Let me go to the source code. Okay, so I'll say MSN. For password I am giving unique. Then identify. Let me refresh it. Okay, so one more object has been introduced. I should have given break. Okay, so I forgot to give break. Okay, so now let me refresh the object. So even though object position has been changed, one more object is introduced, still object identification is made as unique. Why? Because this object is being identified uniquely. I don't have any problem in identifying this object. Then what I said is, no matter what properties, no matter how many objects matched with the username, but still identify the username which is next to the Gmail password. You got what I'm saying? That's how visual relational identifier works always. So visual relational identifier is used to relate the object with another object. So first you take one object which doesn't have any problem in identification, take that object and relate with that. Okay, maybe this object, current object, whatever I'm trying to identify, the current object is on top of the another object, or the current object is bottom of another object, or left side of another object, or right side of another object. Like that you can use. That's how visual relational identifier works. Just let us recap again. Okay, so let us see how exactly those works. Now when I'm adding the object edit field, I'm just adding user. Now why it is taken username, why not Yahoo username? Because name property is given. Logical name always direct based on name. Okay, so now it is Yahoo user which I added. Now what is the location property it has taken? 3, right? So why it is 3 here? This object comes first, and then this and this are in same y coordinates, right? Is it? And this should come as 4, yeah. So this comes first, and this comes second, and this comes third, and this comes fourth. If you see that y coordinate, so this is little slide behind this object, right? So when you say location 3, that means that fourth object it is. Location 0, first object. If I give location as 0, then which object it will be? If I give location as 0, then obviously it will be the last object. If I give location as 1, then it will be the first object. First object. Because this object is slightly before this object, or even both are in same coordinates when it refers to x coordinate, right? Both are in same y coordinate when it refers to x coordinate, this object comes first. Now same thing if I use index, this object comes first, this comes second, this comes third, and this comes fourth, no matter what position it is. You got? Okay. Now, how the visual relational identifier exactly, how visual relational identifier works. Okay. Now let me do one thing. Okay. Let me add password. It has taken as password. What is password? MSN user, right? This is MSN user, and this is Yahoo password. It's supposed to be password, not user. MSN password. Then this is Gmail password. Then this is Outlook password. Okay, I'm adding just password fields. Now what I need to do is I need to identify what is it, user, right? Okay, so this is Yahoo user. I'll just give it as user. Okay, so now I need to identify MSN password, but properties are not common, or properties are not unique. More than one object is identifying with the properties, whatever the properties I am using for username, more than one object is being identified, so that I am using index. But index also not reliable for me, because whenever there is any new object introduced before, then this index property is keep. For this object, index is changing. So that's what we have seen. Now I need to identify MSN password. So you don't need to think about which index it is and which location it is, where the object is located. Then what I will say is identify the username field which is next to the MSN password. Then what I will do is I'll go to the visual relational identifier, and then I will relate this object with MSN password, and I'll say MSN password is right side of the selected object and it is inline. Now say which object it is identifying, MSN user. Then let me change the visual relational identifier here. Visual relational identifier I will change to Outlook password. Then the username field which is right side to, or which is left side to Outlook password. Then if I highlight the object, which object will be highlighted now? If you see that Outlook user. The reason because my relation is like that. So visual relation always will be like this, not only just left. You can give both the coordinates also. Now what I will do is identify the edit field which has got the username, which is in between this Outlook password and the text Outlook user. Then what you can do is here add one more relation, and that label is not there, right? Let me do one thing. Let me add that label to the. So always labels will be treated as. This has taken as sample password. Okay. Now what I am doing is in between password field and some web edit, some label. Okay, so label, it has taken entire thing. It has not taken the particular one. So it's not identifying individual web elements. No, it's not taking the individual ones. Okay, so let it be for now, no problem. But what you can do is not only just you can relate with only one object. You can relate with multiple objects. You can say that the object which is between this object and this object, or the object which is on top of one object or bottom of another object. So like this you can create the boundaries of particular object whenever you are using visual relational identifier. So what exactly we have done here? First, okay, we prefer to mandatory properties. So when unique object is matched with the mandatory, then it stopped there only. But if more than one object is matched with the mandatory, then it has taken assistive property. Then if unique object is matched with assistive property, after using assistive property, then it stopped there. But even after using assistive property, if still more than one object is matched, then it preferred to ordinal identifier. Okay, so when it preferred only more than one object is identified. Okay, so in ordinal identifier, it is using either index or location. Only one it is using, not both. When you say index, then what is that? Depends on the tab position. Okay, out of the objects which are identified by mandatory or assistive, that is called general description. Okay, so the objects which are identified by general description, then this index or location is being applied within those objects. Okay. Now tab will be, index will be set based on the tab position. When I press the tab, which object is being focused first out of all, then index is set based on that. Location, then based on x and y coordinates. Remember that out of these objects, first it will prefer to y coordinate. The object which has placed first based on y coordinate, from left to right it will take. The object which is placed first, then it is taking that object. But if two objects are placed horizontally in same line, it will take x coordinate. Okay, so vertically same line. If it is placed vertically same line, then it will prefer to x coordinate. When it comes to x coordinate, then it will take from top to bottom always. Okay, so that's how ordinal identifier works. But again, sometimes this index or location are not reliable, because if there are new objects introduced, then, or if some of the objects have been eliminated before, then the index property or location property, the positions will be changing. Then in such cases, instead of using ordinal identifier, then you can go with visual relational identifier. So in visual relational identifier, what you can do exactly is, first you can take any of the object which has got unique identification, then relate this object with another object. Okay, so identify the username which is next to Gmail password, or identify the username which is next to Yahoo password, something like that. I can relate the objects. This is called visual relational identifier. When we use visual relational identifier, then ordinal identifier is automatically disabled. The reason, because out of ordinal identifier or visual relational identifier, okay, out of both, then it will use only one. By default, it prefers to ordinal. As soon as you add the visual relational, then ordinal identifier will be disabled. Okay, remember these points. So you have to explain this process when somebody asks you object identification process. Now let us understand the creation time, exactly how the creation time works. Now what I am doing is here, okay, to identify the browser object in the object identification setting, what I am doing is, to identify browser object, I am using name property. I'm using name property. Now let me open our application. This is our application, right? And let me add the object to the repository. Let me delete these objects and let me re-add again. Let it be any, no problem. Username. Did I save the changes? No, not done the change. Object identification setting. Okay. Okay, so it has taken as name, and it also captured ordinal identifier as creation time. Remember that for browser, then even the unique object is matching, still it will capture creation time. Okay, so now what is the property here? 0. Now what exactly that 0 is? Yeah, this is first opened browser. Let me open one more browser. Okay, so this is second open browser on top. Okay, just to differentiate, I just resized it. Now which I highlight, if I highlight now, which object is being identified or highlighted? First open browser, right? Then if I change the creation time as 1, second open browser, so creation time will be set based on the browser which opened first out of all the browsers which are identified. Now let me do one thing. Let me do it in one more way. I'm closing this and I'm closing this also. Then let me open Chrome browser, or you can open Internet Explorer. Both are browser, belongs to browser class only. Then first one. Second one. Third one. Okay, so now I have opened 3 browsers. Okay, so now what I am doing is creation time 1. Which one it will identify? Second browser. Second browser means here it's a third one. Because why it is identify? Actually second browser is Google, right? I opened second browser as Google, but why it is not highlighting Google? Even though I have given creation time as 1 only, because first it will consider the name property. With that name property only orange HRM browsers will be identified. So creation time will apply within those orange HRM browsers only. So that's the reason it is taking second HRM browser. Even though Google is second browser, but it is ignoring that Google because that is not identified with general description. So that's how creation time works. Okay, got it? Okay, now let us understand how ordinal identifier, how smart identification works exactly. Okay. Let us do one thing. Let me open this application again. Okay, so let me open this application. Then what I am doing is in the object repository, I am adding one of the object like this, username, makes us 3 or okay. So we have to use smart identification, right? Let it be. So smart identification, let us use smart identification, say web edit, and for web edit what I am doing is I am selecting enable smart identification. Whenever you want to use smart identification, you must have to enable here. By default for web applications it will be enabled. By default it will be enabled. Okay. Now what we are doing is for base filter I am using HTML tag and type, whatever the properties need to be used. You can use the same properties, whatever you have used in mandatory and assistive, right? So you can use the same properties here also, but this will be taken as another set of properties. Now for filtering what I am doing is, okay, first I am using name property, then I am using maximum length property, then default value, then class, and then HTML ID. Like this there are some other properties that we do have. Say okay. Good. So now I have selected Ordinal smart identification to be used. Then let me add the object now to the repository. I am adding one of the password here. I am adding one of the password. Now if you see that smart identification is enabled. Okay, smart identification is enabled now. Earlier it was disabled. Okay, so now it has taken only the name property, password. It is not considered assistive because one object is unique object was matched with the name. But later sometime what happened is, now if I highlight the object, it is being highlighted. Let us go to the password. What I am doing here, I am changing the name. So object property value has been updated. Now there is no object with this particular name because I have given the name as PWD, but after adding the object to the repository, then later in my application I got updated the property value, but I did not update in the repository. Now let us do one thing. Let me enter the text into this, some text. Okay, I am entering, and let me run the code. It is taking little time to identify the object and see whether it will enter or not. 1 minute, there is one more browser opened. Okay, so I think there is some problem that we have to do one setting. It entered the text. Why it opened one more browser? Because in the record and run settings, okay, so that's the reason it's opened one more browser. Okay, now it has set. Now go to view and the last run results. Let us open the result. So you can see one warning is generated there. Whenever it uses smart identification to identify the object, in the result it will show it as warning. Okay, so warning will be generated for smart identification always. Then let us understand why this warning is, and it says that for password it used smart identification. Okay, so whenever it uses smart identification, so you can see this icon, gradient symbol. So this symbol is used for smart identification. Then select this one. Understand, the smart identification mechanism was invoked. The reason why? Because object not found. The properties whatever we have given under general description, no property has been identified with general properties. So that is the reason it invoked smart identification, because smart identification is enabled. Now, original property is given as name as password, and mid class it's automatically taken class as web edit. Okay, then first it will prefer to, okay, so alternative description, nothing is given. Alternative properties, we have not given anything. Okay, but when it comes to the smart identification, first it is used base filter properties. But 4 objects have been matched with the base filter, because in the base filter properties we have given the type as password and mid class as web edit and HTML tag as an input. All passwords, all password fields have got the type attribute. We have given one type attribute, if you remember or not. Okay, so we have given type attribute here. For all password fields, type as password only, right? So and class will be web edit obviously. HTML tag is input. All four HTML tag is input, type is password only. So base filter did not work for us. Then what happened is here it filled to optional filter. Name, password. But with that name, no object is there, right? With that PWD, no object is there. So what happened there? What it is showing? Ignored. So when the object is not identified with one property, then it will ignore that particular property. Then it used max length. So it has got so max length, but all objects have got same max length. So that property also ignored, or it filtered all 4 objects. Then when it default value, so another property, when it has taken default value, then it has again all 4 has got same default value. So same filter with that property, all 4 objects have been matched. With class, again all 4 have been matched. But when it has taken as HTML ID, then only one object is matched. Then it did not move to another properties. So what happened here? It is taking one, it's not taking all the properties. If it has taken all the properties, these properties would have not been ignored. Right? So it is taking one by one property and it is filtering the objects. It is applying one by one property on each object till the unique object is matched. You got what I am saying? So how the smart identification works is, first okay, it will take one by one property. First it will go to base filter and then takes it. And if base filter is not working, then it will go to optional filter and one by one. It will filter with one by one property till the unique object is matched. In case after using smart identification also still no object is matched, then again we have to look at other mechanism. Okay, see here what happens is name as password. Let me go back again to the source code. Let me update the dually. So now with the mandatory property, whatever I have given, object will match because I just reset the password. Sorry, I reset the property value. Now let me run the script. Okay, so it is little fast now. View last result. If you see that no warning has been generated. If you say password.set, then it did not give any warning, which means that object smart identification is not used. Even though smart identification is enabled, but still it did not use smart identification. Why? Because with the general description itself, it is identifying the unique object. In case if no object is matched, if all three levels whatever we have discussed, if all those three levels are failed to identify the object uniquely, then only it will use smart identification. Otherwise, it won't use smart identification even though it is enabled. You got the difference? So this is how the traditional identification traditional object identification process in UFT. First, it will go to the mandatory. In case if mandatory fails to get the object uniquely, takes assistive. In case if you have used, it's not mandatory to use assistive again. Okay, but if you have given, it prefers to assistive. Then if the unique object is identified with mandatory and assistive, stops there. But after using assistive, still UFT fails to identify the object uniquely, then it prefers to ordinal identifier. Okay. In case if you say that no, ordinal identifier is not reliable for me because even the index or location are changing every time, then okay, instead of using ordinal identifier, then use visual relational identifier. So in visual relational identifier, what you do is first you take one object which doesn't have any problem in identification, then you relate the object with that object. You say that left side of that object, right side of that object, or on top or bottom, like that you can relate. In case if no object is identified, then another option what we do have is smart identification. So when we have the smart identification enabled, then if no object is identified during runtime, then it will automatically invoke the properties of smart identification. It will filter the objects. Here it will filter the objects with one by one property till the unique object is matched. Okay, but in real time, do we use smart identification? Then say no. Generally we don't use smart identification. There are two reasons. Okay, so there are two reasons for not using smart identification. One is whenever we use smart identification, if you see that it is generating one warning, it is generating one warning message. Okay, as a technical guy, you can understand that warning won't give any difference in terms of results for you, right? Warning is just in terms of object identification. But what an end user or what a client thinks, is whenever they see warning in the report, then they see these warnings are generated in application. Because they can't understand, that warning is generated by the tool. People, they think that warning has come from application. So application has got some warnings and all. Then it gives a wrong message to the client. Or the person whoever doesn't know anything about technical knowledge and they are evaluating your result, whatever the results generated by script. This is first reason why we don't use smart identification. And second reason is sometimes object identification identifies a wrong object. How wrong object is? It is filtering with one by one, right? So sometimes while filtering, one wrong object may filter of sudden. Okay, so now let's say for example I'm filtering like this. First I'm using HTML tag, then class, and then so and so. But assume that I have a password field now. I added, so that is the object which is supposed to be filtered. But instead of password, there is one more web edit placed in the application. But when it is filtering with class, then this web edit match, even though that is a wrong object, still when it is filtering with class object, that object will be filtered. So that object will identify. So instead of identifying wrong object, sometimes it may identify, instead of identifying a right object, sometimes it will identify wrong object. Then my script will fail again. That is too dangerous. Instead of clicking on cancel, if it clicks on OK, then impact might be more, if it is very sensitive. Same thing happened in one of our application actually. You know what? We have two things. We have to bring the server down. So when we bring the server down, then the application and all will not work. So in that was a healthcare application. So we have the process like that, and we have two things: ignore and accept. So people have used smart identification to identify. So we have to click on ignore button, but due to some reason smart identification accept button was filtered. So it clicked on accept button, then unnecessarily the server was down, then 2 days time waste, because when the server is completely down, right, data will be refreshed there, because it runs some Unix jobs and all, gone case. So if the object is very sensitive, then don't use any smart identification, because if it identifies the wrong object, then impact might be more. And one more reason is it takes little time to identify. If you see that when it is used smart identification, then there was a little delay in identification. This is one interview question also. Do you prefer to smart identification, or have you used smart identification in your repository? Then say no. Why? Because these are the drawbacks, even though it is one of the good things, but drawbacks are more with that. So that's the reason we did not use smart identification. Then how did you identify the object? When the properties are keep changing, not being identified, then we use regular expressions, or we use some other combinations of properties, which we'll see tomorrow. But clear this process, whatever we have seen. But very, very important thing this is. Very, very important concept, object identification. I will share this video again. Okay. Just go through that one more time, because very theoretical. Most of the times we gone through very theoretical, but it's when you look at this or when you listen, it looks you understood that, but once you start explaining it, then you forget that. So you have to go through multiple times. Okay.